think that's a nice transition to a team that's in a really similar spot in the Indiana Pacers. Obviously they were one game away from winning the NBA Finals, and Tyrese Haliburton goes down with that devastating Achilles injury. So yeah, really a similar year. I think there's a lot of dialogue around this team as a gap year, sort of a same thing as the Celtics. But yeah, I think we can start with the off season and Haliburton because this team just plays with such a, or I should say, played with such a unique style of offense, and it was really tied to Haliburton. How do you think they'll be able to sort of replace that? And yeah, do you guys see that being a problem, or are you just super confident, maybe like a Andrew Nemhard just taking a massive step up?
I do like Andrew Nemhard taking a step up. I actually wrote about a while ago for 8 points, 9 seconds that with this big role he's going to have, I do think he's going to be in all-star conversations. Whether he makes the team or not is a different story, but I do think he'll be in that conversation. And I also feel like the one important thing that fans need to remember is that they still have Rick Carlisle. And Rick Carlisle is one of the greatest offensive minds we've really ever seen in the NBA. And so I have faith that Andrew Nemhard can step it up. I don't think he's going to be Tyrese Haliburton, and I do think that offense is going to look incredibly different. I think they're going to adhere to Nemhard's strengths a little bit more. They're not going to be as fast paced. They're not going to do the run and gun offense as much, but I think they'll still be able to find a nice balance where they can still keep a little bit of their identity, but just have it be to Nemhard's strengths. And so for that reason, I mean, they're going to take a step back, but I do think they're going to be able to keep up some of that same offensive firepower that fans have kind of been used to over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I think that definitely will take a step back. The one thing that I've noticed from the Indiana Pacers is it's kind of like a collective unit. Everyone's kind of there. Everyone steps up. Everyone delivers. Now, obviously, they still lost Myles Turner, so there's the hole at that center position now. But I still think those kind of wing players, those other guards like Nemhard, like TJ McConnell, are going to be able to rise to the occasion here and kind of be able to take those next steps for the Indiana Pacers. I'm not going to compare Andrew Nemhard to these types of players for the play style, but I think he can kind of maybe put himself into these kind of like Kyle Lowry, Mike Conley kind of discussions where he's like a very, very great starting point guard, not like a top five or a top eight, but is like still respected around the league. And I think we can kind of see that development here with him getting that next step with Tyrese Haliburton being out. And I think him working alongside guys like TJ McConnell, like Aaron Nesmith, like Bennedict Mathruin is going to be very intriguing to see how this team can kind of work within that unit and kind of see the differences of play. Because with Tyrese, obviously the offense mainly runs through him. It's kind of a central focused offense. I think this year with the Pacers, we're going to see obviously that team style that we've obviously seen in the past, but I think it's going to be even more bought into that with Rick Carlisle. And I think they're going to be very, very fun to watch this year.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, Nemhart, I think, is really in line for a breakout season. I think looking at the early most improved player odds, he's towards the top, and I think that's rightfully so. I think I'm expecting a massive season from him, and then from a playmaking standpoint, I think we're gonna be able to see a lot more of his game, and also just scoring. I think every playoffs he's really elevated his game, so we've seen him do that. He could possibly be in all-star conversations. I could definitely see that. I do think the loss of Halliburton will still be pretty severe, just considering that, I mean, the two guys that can really initiate the offense now are Nemhart and then TJ McConnell off the bench, where Halliburton just adds a whole nother dimension. But at the same time, like you guys talked about, Rick Carlisle is, in my opinion, he's a top three coach in basketball. Maybe even second behind Eric Spoelstra. I think I would have him in that conversation. But yeah, I think in the style of play, in terms of just everybody eats style of offense, they move the ball really well. I do think that will help them because it is such an unselfish group. So I do think that will sort of benefit them there. So yeah, I could see them still maintaining at least a high level offense, although I'm expecting some growing pains without Halliburton, especially early on in the season. I think the next part we got to talk about, especially with their offseason, bit of a shocker. Myles Turner deciding to leave and sign with the rival Milwaukee Bucks. And then they ended up trading for Jay Huff to replace him. And then they have Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman coming back from Achilles injuries. Tony Bradley's still there. So, yeah, how do you guys think they'll be able to sort of replicate Turner's impact? And do you see the center rotation as potentially problematic, or are you confident that these guys will be able to step up?
I think the one big problem with Myles Turner leaving, and I wrote about this multiple times, is that Myles Turner wasn't a perfect center. Like, he had his flaws. He couldn't rebound. His defense regressed. And we saw it in the finals. If his shot isn't falling, he doesn't really provide a lot of offensive value. So he's definitely not a perfect center, and I don't think he's irreplaceable. But the one thing is that if the Pacers were to find a replacement for him, it's going to take a long time, I think, before they find a 1-for-1 replacement. So because of that, I think all things considered, they did what was best, like what was probably the best move with not committing to a 1-for-1 replacement and just kind of running with a committee. I actually really like Jay Huff. I think if the Pacers are trying to seamlessly move into the next era without Myles Turner, I think Jay Huff is going to be their guy. I also like Isaiah Jackson a lot. I think he gradually improved and looked really solid before going down with his Achilles injury last year. And I haven't given up on James Wiseman yet. I don't know if he's ever going to live up to that number 2 overall hype, but if there's one team that can really rejuvenate his career, I think it's the Pacers. And then I think Tony Bradley, to be honest, I don't think he's going to make it on the final roster. I think they're going to get rid of him. He's on a non-guaranteed deal. Even given their situation, I think having 4 centers, it just isn't really ideal. I could be wrong, but I don't see them retaining him heading into the season. So I think their center situation, I don't know if I'd call it a problem, but I definitely think it's something that leaves a lot to be desired because there's a good chance that this works. Everybody in that center rotation has a lot to prove. They all have a chip on their shoulder, but they're all also just kind of like second options that are fighting for that number 1 option spot. And I don't think that's great. Jay Huff I don't think he's ever averaged more than 20 points per game in his career yet or something like that. Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman are both coming off Achilles injuries, and it's not like either of them were that established even beforehand. And I just feel like, fortunately for them, with them being in a gap year, if we want to call it that, they have time to really experiment and figure it out. But I don't think any of them right now, as it stands, are trustworthy number 1 centers on a championship caliber team. So I don't think they've solved their Myles Turner problem yet, but I do think there's a world where this can work. I just don't know if it's going to.
Yeah, I think they fall very similar to the Celtics, not only with just the Achilles injuries to both their superstars, but also losing their dominant big men. And I think for the Pacers, they have a little bit more depth with those guys, like you mentioned, like Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman. Isaiah Jackson having some flashes. I remember last season on the defensive end, looking like he could be a promising backup big. So I still have some good insight on them, but I think losing Myles Turner is definitely going to be a big detriment to this team, obviously, with him being there the last couple years. Even though he might not have been the perfect fit or the most dominant center for this team, with them in the gap year, running with Jay Huff, running with Isaiah Jackson, running with James Wiseman, I do think they still will get exposed into that front court there, unfortunately. But I do think Jay Huff is like one of those kind of, like you mentioned, Elie, if you're taking the gap year, this is like the flyer you want to take on for the Indiana Pacers, just because he presents a little of the similar offensive qualities that a guy in Myles Turner can bring, and I think he could be kind of maybe not that 1-for-1 replicative replacement, but kind of bring a little bit of that role. And if they can kind of supplement that with 2 centers to kind of be that one defensive beast and one offensive beast, I think that could help out the Indiana Pacers a little bit more. But I do think it is a little bit of a if you're playing against the Indiana Pacers, even though they already lost Tyrese Haliburton, you might think attacking their guard room might be their issue. I still think the center one is a little bit bigger.
Yeah, for sure. I'm pretty concerned about this center rotation. Although I do like Jay Huff and Isaiah Jackson. I think they're both pretty intriguing. Huff, especially with the floor spacing, and then he showed some pretty solid defensive chops as well with Memphis last year. And then Isaiah Jackson, before he went down with the Achilles injury, I thought he was a really nice under the radar big man. Really solid skill set as that sort of rim runner type, high energy guy. So I like both of those players. I just think they're best utilized in a backup role, and I think not having that clear cut start and center option could hurt them. Jackson, if he wasn't coming off the Achilles injury, I'd be a little bit more confident. But coming off the Achilles injury as a center who wasn't super established, he's still young, which is good, but that does concern me. James Wiseman, unfortunately, we haven't seen really a ton from him in his NBA career, and then again going down with that injury could hurt him. So yeah, a little bit concerned there, and I think it's just in the modern NBA, it's so hard to win without a quality center rotation, and I think sort of similar to the Celtics, this is probably a bottom 5, center rotation in the league. So I think that's going to be tough. But at the same time, I think the big advantage that they have, I think we'll probably talk about it damn near every segment, is Rick Carlisle and just how he's able to get the most out of his guys. And if there's anyone who can make it work, I think it's Carlisle. But yeah, at the same time, I think this does have to be a pretty serious concern with this Pacers team. But yeah, I think we could talk about something that might be a little bit more excited and optimistic, and that's Bennedict Mathruin getting a bigger role. He showed really a ton of promise last year, and he's always been that sort of microwave scorer. He had a massive Game 7 after Haliburton went down. But yeah, are you guys how confident are you guys in Mathruin having a big season this year?
Yeah, I'm very confident. And I like Mathern. I think that dude has so much just talent, and he's still only 23. I think I also think that he's I think one of probably two players that benefit from Andrew Nemhard being the lead guard. Obviously, the other one's Andrew Nemhard himself, but I actually think Bennedict Mathruin is better off with Nemhard as the point guard next season specifically because the pace isn't going to be as fast, and he's going to be able to put the ball on the ground a lot more because the one problem with Matherin in Indiana is that he's not a good fit to their system, which is why his future in Indiana is still up in the air. But with Nemhard leading the way, they're going to be able to kind of slow things down, run a more traditional offense with set plays in the half court, and I think that's only going to do good things for Bennedict Matherin, who also has a lot to play for because he's eligible for a rookie scale contract extension this summer, and it doesn't look like he's going to get it. So he has to kind of show out next year. And I think with, like I keep saying, with Nemhard being the lead point guard, I think they're going to let Matherin be Matherin. And on top of him also taking on a bigger role and just naturally progressing and being in another year of his career, I do think he's going to be in for a career year, and I think he's going to establish himself as a long-term fit with the Pacers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree any much more with that statement. If there was one player I'm so bought on for this Pacers team, it's Bennedict Mathurin. Dating back to the draft, I was high on him coming out of Arizona. When he got drafted to Indiana, I was very interested with the fit and how he would work. And I like how you mentioned, Elie, how he doesn't really work with Tyrese Haliburton. As someone who obviously doesn't cover the Pacers or watch them as much, that's the one thing that I've been able to pick out from the Tyrese Haliburton, Bennedict Mathruin kind of a scenario that they've been able to use is when you put Mathruin in the starting lineup, he needs the ball in his hands, and when Tyrese has the ball controlling it the whole entire time, Mathruin just can't put the ball on the floor, like you said, can't attack. He can't work into the system that benefits him. But with having a guy in Andrew Nemhard who is not only going to kind of control that offense, but work in Bennedict Mathruin within that offense, I think he's going to see that exceptional rise. You mentioned him being on this contract year. This is a big prove-it year for Bennedict Mathruin, not only to maybe signal himself to getting a long-term deal with Indiana, but if he can't get a long-term deal with Indiana, finding out where he could get that long-term deal. With the Pacers kind of dating into this year, before the kind of finals run they really made with Bennedict Mathruin and stuff, he was one of the guys that I thought maybe they could look to flip to go out and get that other superstar to kind of take them to that next level. Now, obviously, they made the NBA Finals. They have all these young, intriguing pieces. They're not going to go out and do that move, specifically with Tyrese Haliburton down. But I still do think that's something that kind of brings some intrigue within both of these players and in this camp with the Pacers is kind of seeing how Matherin pans out, finding out what that payment is to complement them both. And then if you can't complement them both, trying to find that complementary piece while also getting enough value back for Matherin as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I think we're all pretty high on Matherin, and yeah, you got to really expect a big season. I mean, he can always score, and that's always been known. I think for him, it's just establishing a little bit more of that playmaking side of his game and then just a little bit more consistency. But with an increased role, I think that's pretty likely. I think his role has fluctuated a little bit over these past couple of seasons, especially just how deep this Pacers team is. And if he's not having his best night as a scorer, maybe he didn't get as much minutes. But this time around, he's really going to be that established starter, and I think that will help him just establish a little bit more consistency. And he's just so talented and such a gifted scorer. And he is still very young, which I think some people might forget about. But he's like 22, 23. So I think a leap is definitely in the cards for him. And yeah, I think just seeing what he was able to do in the NBA Finals on the biggest stage made me even more of a believer in Matherin, especially that Game 7. He was just absolutely insane. So yeah, I'm pretty high on him as well. So yeah, I think that will be one of the more exciting aspects of this Pacers season. Obviously, it's brutal to lose Haliburton, but seeing what a guy like Matherin can do, I think will be super exciting. Another guy we can talk about, I know you recently wrote about this, Elie, would be Aaron Nesmith potentially having a bigger role and maybe somewhat of a breakout season as well. So, how are you guys feeling about Nesmith's role with this team? I mean, he's really rejuvenated his career after a slow start in Boston since the trade, and he's became really one of the better role players in the league. But do you think we could see a little bit more from him this season?
I think so. What I'm really excited about for Nesmith is that he has gradually gotten better every single year. He's gradually become a more important player every single year. And I do think he's going to have a bigger role offensively. I don't think his role is going to change as much as a guy like Nemhard's, Mathurin's, or even a guy like Siakam's. I think he's still more or less going to be the same guy. But the part that I'm very interested about, and this was one of the recent articles I wrote for 8.9 seconds, is that without Tyrese Haliburton, I think Aaron Nesmith is going to have to really improve as a shot creator because most of his value comes as being a catch and shoot 3 point guy. And he's become a real sharpshooter, but he doesn't really create his own shots. He doesn't really put the ball on the ground a lot more. And a lot of that is because of Tyrese Haliburton giving him the ball in such a perfect way. But with him not being able to do that next season, obviously, with him being out, it's really going to force Nesmith to kind of add that new dynamic to his game, which I think in turn should help him and the Pacers improve for the long run. But I really like what Nesmith has to offer. He's incredibly efficient, I think is another thing that's kind of overlooked with him. His lows aren't really that low. Obviously, he'll have bad games, he'll have duds, but I think that's one of the biggest differences between him and Bennedict Mathruin in the sense of them kind of both being in the sense that Mathern is, I think, incredibly streaky, whereas Nesmith kind of isn't. He's a lot more consistent. He's a lot more efficient, like I said, but I feel like his highs aren't as high as a guy like Matherin's. But he should be able to take on a bigger role next year and kind of continue to prove that. So I think Nesmith could be in for. I mean, I'll probably say this about everybody. I think he could be in for a career year, but I think I'm most intrigued by him because he has to kind of change his game up a little bit to make up for Haliburton's absence. And like I said, I think that's going to add a whole new dynamic to his game and the Pacers system overall.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think he's one of the better like plug and play pieces for the Pacers. That's what I kind of realized when watching the finals and watching the playoffs, and specifically even in those comebacks where Nesmith was getting hot from specific points. We obviously knew him from the Boston Celtics, and I never thought that he would pan out to be this good. I thought that he could have a chance to be a standard player in the NBA and get that opportunity, but he's definitely proved his own with the Pacers kind of fitting in with the glove. Elie, you mentioned him trying to be a little bit more on ball, kind of creating his own shot. And I think we're going to have to see that because he was more catch and shoot, kind of like that Sam Hauser type of guy for this Pacers team. Maybe obviously better on the defensive end compared to Sam Hauser, but that catch and shoot kind of guy on the wing that the offense is just going to look forward to kind of trying to find on some wide open threes or some potential kickouts. So having him playing alongside Andrew Nemhard, I think we're going to see that. And I think we're going to see Aaron Nesmith be a better 3 point shooter because of that. I think we're going to see his numbers rise, even though he's going to be taking more shot opportunities. I do think he's going to be getting more comfortable from 3 point range. And if there's like anyone that I feel very confident on this Pacers team to really take that next step, it is going to be a guy in Aaron Nesmith because I think the role that they're going to ask him to play as well isn't going to be too big comparative to maybe like a Bennedict Mathruin who has to take that next leap to be that next superstar, or an Andrew Nemhard who has to replace a Tyrese Haliburton for that effective offensive or defensive prowess. I think a guy and Nesmith kind of, since he is that plug and play guy, has that ability to kind of just mesh well and kind of feel well wherever he is needed on the court.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his development as a shot creator could be pretty vital. And yeah, he's still, I mean, kind of younger. He got drafted in 2020, and he's a lottery pick for a reason. So I do think that aspect of his game could be seen a little bit more this year. And then just how this Pacers offense really empowers everyone to create for themselves, especially in a year like this. I think that will really bode well for him. So I think that's definitely something we can see. And yeah, definitely super optimistic about Nesmith's season. But yeah, before we get into breakout players, let's talk about Siakam a little bit. Really, I think he was for the most part really that first option as a scorer. Obviously, Halliburton was initiating everything, but I feel like Siakam really made that offense work a lot of the time. I think it was really that duo, and then along with just so many great role players and just the everybody eats style of offense. But what are you guys sort of expecting from Siakam this season as that definitive first option and probably initiating a lot more of the offense as well?
I think he'll definitely get a lot more touches. I think will kind of remind everybody just how good he really is. I mean, I don't know if he needs to remind people given how well he played in the playoffs, but he hasn't been the number one option since joining Indiana, and I think I'm really interested to see kind of how the offense works around him now because they haven't really because up to this point their offense has been built around Tyrese Haliburton and kind of like we were saying earlier, just about sharing the ball. Everybody kind of gets a little bit of an opportunity, but I think a lot of that's just going to go to Siakam now. I think Siakam is their most consistent player, and I think they're going to have to rely on him a lot more. I don't know how different his season looks. I still kind of feel like more or less he's going to be the same player just with more shots, and in turn he might obviously have more points, and if he can remain efficient, he could be in for his best year in a very long time. I think they're going to utilize him a lot more obviously in the mid range. I think they're still going to be able to take advantage of him improving as a 3-point shooter. And so I think more or less he's going to look like the same player, but just with a lot more opportunities. And in turn, I think he might be a little bit more aggressive as well. And so I think while it's not an ideal situation for the Pacers offense to be in, I at least think there's something there with Siakam.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited to see what he can do. Obviously, with no Myles Turner now being there, he's going to be the main, like, lone dominant scorer in that front court. And I think him with Jay Huff with his spacing ability is going to allow Siakam to really dominate that paint and be a solid post scorer for this team, for the Indiana Pacers. I know they don't really play to that style. They obviously are a little bit more fast paced, kind of run the pick and roll, do stuff like that. But I think utilizing Siakam maybe in a different little light, similar to how Joe Mazzulla is going to build around Jaylen Brown. We obviously know Rick Carlisle is a great head coach. He can kind of bring different styles in for different players or maybe even like different lineups kind of utilizing that. But I think Siakam as a post scorer is going to be pretty solid for this team. And I think we haven't really seen him be able to be that lone star in the front court, even dating back to Toronto. There was, Scotty Barnes there, OG Anunoby there, Jakob Poeltl there, Marcus Gasol was there. There's been so much just clogging in that front court for Siakam. And Siakam, with having that, has been able to showcase that he can still be a valuable scorer. But I feel like he's one of the most like underrated players across the league, hands down. Maybe it's because he plays that like power forward position. It's kind of forgotten now with positionless basketball. But like I just feel like a lot of people just count him out, kind of doubt him, and might even be doubting his opportunity to deliver this season within the Pacers being that number one option. So I'm excited to see what he can use that hunger and kind of anger out on the court. And I think we're gonna see him have, like you said, kind of maybe not the best efficiency, but have better stats out there for this season and truly show that he can be a number one scorer for this squad.
Yeah, most definitely. I feel like after the playoffs, there's no reason not to be extremely confident in Siakam and what he can bring to the table. He's just so versatile, too. I think that's another part of his game that's just super crucial, and I think we'll really be able to see everything from his game. And then sort of similar to what we were talking about with the Celtics, with Jaylen Brown, if his team ends up really establishing themselves as a clear-cut playoff team, it's going to be in part because of a big season from Siakam, and I think that's a fair expectation to have. Yeah, I think, like you said, Bruce, he's definitely one of the more underrated players in basketball. I think that's changing a little bit after just the stellar playoffs, but I think this season will be a chance for him just to remind everyone and show once again that he's a legitimate top 20 caliber player in this league. And yeah, I'm very confident to see what he can do as a scorer, and he's really impressed me, especially since being traded to the Pacers. I feel like a lot of people were a little bit lower on him during his Raptors tenure, but this system's just proved to be an absolutely perfect fit. So yeah, I'm super optimistic to see what Siakam can do this season, and yeah, I've definitely high hopes for him. I think we can sort of move on to our breakout player for this Pacers team. I feel like I don't know about you guys, but I feel like there's a lot of options. Especially doing this breakout player for a lot of these season previews. Some teams they don't have as many options, but this team you could go in so many different directions. So yeah, take it away, boys. Who are you guys feeling for your breakout player?
So I think my real answer is Bennedict Mathruin, followed by Andrew Nemhard. But I at least want to shout out somebody else who I've been a big fan of for a long time and somebody who I think has to, is another guy that kind of has a chip on his shoulder and should be able to perform next year. And that's Jarris Walker. I'm a big believer in Jarris Walker. Like, I think Jarris Walker he brings such a unique skill set to that Pacers team, one that they really need. And the main problem with him is that he hasn't really had a consistent opportunity. He's shown flashes. He's obviously improved on both sides of the ball, but for one reason or another, he hasn't really been able to get that consistent opportunity. And I think now he will. And something I'm very, very, very interested to see is if they play him as a small ball center at any point, because I feel like he's a guy that can kind of he fits that mold. He's very physical. I think he's looked very I wouldn't say solid, but he's obviously improved defensively and in a weird way he can kind of stretch the floor a little bit. Obviously not in the same way that a guy like Myles Turner can, but I think he could be able to kind of space things out for Indiana and he's another guy whose future with the team is up in the air. I actually feel like with him getting that opportunity next season, which he's going to, and like I said, I'm a big believer in his. He's only 21, I think, too. Like he's still incredibly young. Like I said, he has a unique skill set, and I think, I mean, with the chip on his shoulder, I really feel like he's going to come out and kind of show everybody what he's capable of next season.
I really like that Jarris Walker pick. That's where I was going to go too, because I think he's just absolutely phenomenal for this Pacers team, and I think he has gotten that opportunity yet with them having such a crowded front court. And Obi Toppin being there and all these other players, I just think that this is going to be the final, like the make it or break it year for Jarris Walker. Because I know for Pacers fans, they kind of want to see him play. They have seen him play in bunches, and he's looked good in those bunches. But they want to see him actually get those minutes to prove and be out there on the court and to kind of get that role locked up. Because if not, then obviously you maybe wasted a lottery pick on a guy or could have had that high value to potentially trade him later earlier on in his career to where you kind of flundered that. So I do think for the Pacers fans, Jarris Walker has got to be that guy, specifically like you mentioned, Elie, with them having no true definitive center. He can kind of play into that small ball five role with that physicality that he showed off in Houston. And I think he could be pretty dominant for this Pacers team and trying to make a name for himself this year.
Yeah, that's a really intriguing pick. He was definitely on my list. I like to have a couple backups. But yeah, super intriguing guy. Just really a bruising interior guy. But he can also space the floor a little bit. And yeah, I am interested to see if they use him as that small ball five. And who knows, maybe that could be sort of the remedy to their center problem. I think there's a good shot. A former lottery pick, entering his third season, I believe. So yeah, kind of a make or break year. But I have high hopes. And in the limited minutes that he did get, especially last year, was pretty impressed. Keeping with the same theme of under the radar guys, and I believe this guy's also in his third year, I'm going to go with Ben Shepherd as my breakout player. Didn't play a ton as a rookie, but dating back to the draft, he was a guy that I was pretty high on. And then last season, I was super impressed with him in the minutes that he got. He's just a really, really pesky defender, and he can guard a couple different positions. More so a perimeter guy, but really impressive defender in my opinion. The shot hasn't totally been there, but going back to college, I mean, we're talking about a guy who shot nearly 40% on his career from beyond the arc at Belmont. So I'm impressed with that aspect of his game, and I think that's something we're going to see a lot more of. Same theme with a lot of the guys we've been talking about. I think he's going to be empowered a little bit more as a playmaker and creator. I don't know how much he has in his bag, so to speak, but I do think we're going to see him take a jump in that regard. And then, yeah, I think just as an all-around player, he's pretty impressive. So I think if we see, Ben Shepherd suddenly getting 25 plus minutes a game, that wouldn't shock me, and then putting up really solid numbers, again, that wouldn't surprise me at all. So he's definitely more of an under-the-radar guy, but someone I'm pretty high on in this team.
Yeah, I like Ben Shepherd. He got some minutes in the playoffs, I'm pretty sure, as well last season. And I know when the Celtics played against him, he was pretty solid from the 3-point range. So, yeah, if he can, again, if they need more offense on the 3-point line, I think he could provide that. Maybe it will help in the playmaking department as well. Kind of getting into that guard room with McConnell and Nemhard could definitely benefit them in that aspect.
Yeah, I do just kind of want to add one thing. I like Ben Shepherd too. I think the main problem with him is that he has an incredibly low ceiling. Like I feel like the player he is just the player he's going to be. But kind of in a similar note, I feel like somebody that we just have to at least mention is Johnny Furphy as well, because Johnny Furphy's another guy who I'm also a very big fan of, and he's going to be gunning potentially for that Ben Shepherd role, and so I think this upcoming season is going to be huge for him. He looked fantastic in summer league. And so Johnny Furphy, I mean, I don't think he's going to be an all-star or anything like that, but I like Johnny Furphy a lot, and he's another guy that I have pretty high hopes for next year.
Yeah, Furphy's definitely intriguing, and like you said, I mean, I'm more of a Ben Shepherd guy, but yeah, it wouldn't shock me if he did take away some of his minutes there. And yeah, just super impressive in summer league, and he's also 5 years younger than Shepherd, so the upside's definitely there. he didn't shoot the ball too well as a rookie, but he also didn't play much. But dating back to his days in Kansas, he was just an absolute knockdown shooter with really solid size. So I think that's just a really intriguing type of player, especially in this Pacer system. All right, I think we can sort of move on to the same conversation we had with the Celtics. Where do you guys sort of lean on the tank versus compete side of things? I mean, I think we kind of talked about it with the Celtics, so we might all sort of be on the same page again
Yeah.
with the Pacers. But yeah, where do you guys lean on the tank versus compete conversation for them?
Compete. That, to be honest, I don't know if this is a hot take. I actually don't really know what the consensus is, but I think their outlook for next season looks much better than Boston's does. I think Indiana can still make some noise in the East. I don't think they're going to make it back to the finals or anything like that, but that's exactly it. They were just in the NBA Finals 2 months ago, and they took the best team in the league to a game 7. And let's just be honest, if Tyrese Haliburton never goes down, they probably win that game and ultimately the championship. And so obviously their team's going to look very different next year, but this Pacers team is still incredibly young. They're still very talented. Like I obviously know they lost Tyrese Haliburton for the year. They lost Myles Turner. They're gonna go through some rough patches, but they still have a good team. And I feel like if there's one thing that the Pacers have proved over the last 2 years, it's that they do their best when people count them out, and that's exactly where they're at this upcoming season. So I don't think a deep playoff run is going to happen. I don't think they're going to be able to avenge their finals loss yet. I do think they're going to be in title contention for a long time. And kind of like what I said about Boston, there is value for a team like the Pacers just making it to the playoffs and getting some more experience and we know that they're a team that kind of rises to the occasion. So they are capable of kind of shocking the basketball world again and making some noise in the playoffs, especially in an Eastern Conference that's this wide open. So I'm all for competing, probably for a different reason than I am for the Celtics, but I'm definitely more on that side of the coin.
Yeah, I would say competing as well. I think if you put them into that tanking situation, it kind of puts them into a scenario where if they do get a top pick, then it's like, who are we playing through? We're adding another guy. We have to find minutes for kind of get into our rotation and kind of really have to stand out. And from looking at their past lottery picks and stuff like that, they haven't really implemented that as much. So I think them kind of going into competing and, pushing for that championship is still the right wave. Once again, like Elie mentioned, even though they lost Tyrese Haliburton, their best player, they still work as a unit. It's not like Tyrese is their central star and it is just, a bunch of duds after that. This team can all work together. And I know Tyrese is going to be a big focal point taken away, and specifically Myles Turner as well. But I do think these role players and guys that did stick up and rise to the occasion throughout the playoffs multiple times will do that through the regular season, specifically with Rick Carlisle kind of leading the way. So I'm going to put them in the competing section.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think there's really any reason for them to tank, and sort of similar to the Celtics. I don't think it's really in this organization's DNA. I don't see Carlisle as a guy who would lean into the tank at all. I don't see this Pacers organization, who we've really never seen lean into a tank, do that, especially after they're coming off a season where they almost won the championship. I mean, obviously with Haliburton, it's a completely different scenario, but I just don't think they're going to go from that to, hey, let's take a total gap year tank. And I've seen interviews with Rick Carlisle where he's viewed the sort of gap year notion as disrespectful, and I think that's pretty understandable. So yeah, I do think this team can be in the mix with in the East. I do think it is worth noting though that just before Haliburton got injured, they traded with the Pelicans to get back their 2026 first round pick. So if things go poorly for this team, maybe some more injuries arise, or maybe they're just kind of a mess without Haliburton and Turner. They do have that sort of fallback option of just worst case scenario, or maybe even who knows, they miss the playoffs by a couple games and then suddenly they shoot up into the top four. I just think that's interesting to note. But yeah, I don't see this team tanking at all. And yeah, definitely on the more compete side. I do think it's interesting that you brought up that you're a little bit more confident in them than the Celtics, Elie, because the over-under for this Pacers team is 37.5, which is 5 games less than the Celtics. Okay. What do you guys make of the line?
Yeah. I mean, I'm crushing the over. I just feel like that's ridiculous. Like, no, listen, I could be overrating the Pacers. I 100% could be. I just feel like their outlook for next season is much better than people are giving it credit for. Because I think their fall from grace is crazy. Like, they go from, like I said earlier, being 3 quarters away, 2 quarters away from an NBA championship to now you don't have your star point guard. You don't have Myles Turner. In turn, your bench is going to look a lot weaker. Like, I obviously get it. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe I'm overthinking that. But I still think this team is in a position to compete next year. Not necessarily for a championship, but I think they're gonna, like I said, make some noise in the playoffs. And like I said before, they play their best when people are counting them out. And if that over under tells me anything, is that people are counting them out. So like I said, I'm crushing the over. I do think they're gonna be again at least a play-in team, but I think they're a team that maybe won't be competing in June, but they're not a team that I think you can just overlook next year.
Yeah, I think specifically too, even though the East is kind of wide open in the top front, you can kind of look at the bottom of the East and kind of figure out or pinpoint who's going to be there. And I feel like even with these injuries for the Pacers, they're not that bad, similar to what we said with the Boston Celtics. So, like you said, Elie, I do think they'll be around that play-in scenario. I think they're probably around the 7-8 around the Celtics there. I have to hit the over of 37.5 wins. I just think that's too low. I feel like that's just maybe if they were like the 10 seed, that's where they would kind of be around, but I don't see them being that bad, so I would have to give that over a smashing of the button and might have to eventually on my own phone.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of a disrespectful line, honestly, especially compared to the Celtics, who are 5 games ahead. Personally, I do think the Celtics are just a notch above them. I'd sort of have them penciled in as the 8 seed, Pacers 9 seed. But I don't think there's a big difference at all. I expect this Pacers team to be really in that low 40s win range, similar to what I said about the Celtics, like right around that 500 mark. I think 37 is just a little too low, and I do think maybe the market size plays into account with these betting odds a little bit, personally. But yeah, I mean, I think this team, I think the advantage that the Celtics have is their system's really built around the Jays. Obviously, they had a lot of changes this offseason, but I feel like the Pacer system was more so, well, it is an everybody eats offense and it's built around a lot of ball movement. Haliburton was the clear engine, whereas the Celtics, I think they really played through the Jays, and then you have more of that clear cut star taking over for Tatum in Brown. Obviously, they still have Siakam, which is huge, but at the same time, you're really expecting a jump from Nemhard to be back into that next step. But at the same time, I do think the Pacers have a lot of players, sort of like we talked about on the breakout players that could take that next step, and there could be a lot of internal growth. I don't think they can be counted out at all in that regard. I just do think the Celtics are slightly built a little bit better to withstand the absence of Tatum than the Pacers with Haliburton. And when you look at some of the on-off numbers, the Pacers just didn't do very well at all with Haliburton off the court. So I think that's going to be a massive adjustment. But yeah, who knows? I think these teams are super similar. So I do think it's reasonable to expect the Pacers to be a little bit better. But yeah, I view the Celtics just a notch above them. I think that, I don't know what you guys are feeling seeding wise, but I feel like this like 6 through 10 range in the East is just so hard to predict.
Yeah, that's probably roughly where I would have them too. I think I think they're guaranteed at least a play-in spot. But kind of like what I was saying about Boston, there are just other teams that I confidently put above them: Cleveland, New York, Orlando. I would put Detroit above them, and I still like Milwaukee and teams like that more. So I think the 6 to 10 range is very fair. I think my overall assessment of Indiana, especially in comparison to the Celtics, is I think they might have kind of like what you were saying. I think the Celtics might be better fit to kind of make up for Jason Tatum's absence and just their retooling and everything like that. So I could see a world, I guess, where Boston finishes with a better regular season record. But when it comes to the playoffs, I feel like I have more trust in the Pacers just because of what they've shown over the last couple of years. And I don't know. I don't know. I feel like they probably have a little bit more to play for than Boston does. Obviously, if you're in the playoffs, you're aiming for the championship. I'm not trying to say the Celtics won't take it seriously or anything, but like we keep saying, the Pacers were just one win away from an NBA championship. And I feel like if you can have an opportunity to get back to that stage, you're going to do whatever you can to get there. I'm not saying it's going to work, but I do think Indiana is capable of surprising some people next year. So I agree with the 6 to 10 seed area. I feel like that's probably what it's going to be, but I do think they're still a team to keep an eye on, assuming they make it to the playoffs.
I would agree, and I think that, like you said, Eamon, the 6 to 10 is really, really weird. Like, I feel like the top five we kind of have solidified are like Orlando, Detroit, New York, Cleveland, and Atlanta. And then after really that, it's like Milwaukee, Boston, Philly if they're healthy. Some people are high on the Raptors. Some people like the Miami Heat. Some people think the Hornets maybe could do something. So there's like a lot of confusion. I just want to go back to that win total because I'm looking at the standings from last year, and the Chicago Bulls had 39 wins. So if they think that the Pacers can't get more than the Chicago Bulls, I'm genuinely concerned. The Suns had 36, and I got to watch that atrocious season, and I can tell you that without Tyrese Haliburton, as long as Rick Carlisle can manage the team and not run random offense like Budenholzer would wanted to, they'll get above those 37 wins. So feeling a little bit more confident with that Pacers, but maybe who knows, maybe a team like Charlotte just comes out of nowhere with their young guns and kind of just powers through, or Philly does stay healthy this season and actually looks dominant, and that kind of pushes back the Pacers or the Celtics. But I feel like kind of sitting around that, a 40 win total right around that 8 to 9 seed is pretty solid for them.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good point. Just comparing them to some of the teams last year. Bulls, that's a great one. I mean, I don't think there's any way they finished with a sort of lesser record. I think the only scenario I see them hitting the under is injuries, or just they're literally right under. They hit 37 wins or something. But at the same time, yeah, definitely expecting the over. I'll throw out an interesting little question, especially as Bruce was talking about some of the teams within that range. If you had to pick, since we're sort of all in agreement that the Celtics and Pacers will both at least be in the play-in, if you had to pick between Miami, Philly, and Toronto, one of those teams has to miss the play-in. Who do you guys sort of lean towards there?
I would, I mean, I would probably give it to Philly just for the health concerns. I think talent wise, I would probably give it to, probably Toronto, but I just don't know if I trust Paul George and Joel Embiid being healthy for all of next season, especially because I think there's that stat where they have the most back to backs, or they're at least up there for back to backs next year, and that obviously doesn't bode well for either of those guys. I just kind of feel like, we saw what they looked like last year without Joel Embiid and Paul George, and if it is going to be more of the same, I just don't think a postseason run is realistic. To say, if they are at least relatively healthy, I think that could obviously be different, but just as it stands, I feel like they're probably my pick for that.
I would say Toronto is mine. I just don't trust Toronto, honestly. They just don't really sell me on their gameplay. The wing system hasn't worked these last couple of years. I'm not really buying into a RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, Scotty Barnes lineup. I think the intrigue is definitely there for the potential to grow and be better, but I just think they don't mesh well enough together. I know Miami still has those holes of who's going to be that star, but at least Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero can work the pick and roll together, some cohesiveness there. And I think with Philly, even if Joel Embiid or Paul George isn't there, we'll see hopefully a fully healthy season of Jared McCain, Tyrese Maxey, some of these other younger guys that they had, VJ Edgecombe, who they just drafted. I know they also got like Jabari Walker, I think, from the Nets or something like that. They got some like intriguing end of the lineup kind of depth pieces / two-way guys that I think maybe could step up if they do need. So I think that Toronto is the one, just talent-wise, fit-wise, just doesn't really schematically work for me.
Yeah, I'd probably go Philly just because of the health. Like Elie was talking about. Yeah, with all due respect, I don't think you can just trust Joel Embiid and Paul George to stay healthy at this point. It'd be great from a basketball fan perspective if they could, but at this point in their careers, I don't trust it. But I could definitely see the argument for Toronto, especially if you are sort of banking on somewhat of Philly's health and then internal growth. I think having McCain just in the mix for a full season will be helpful, and I think they'll be a lot better than like the 13 seed that they were last year. But yeah, this Toronto team's just an absolute like jigsaw puzzle. It really makes absolutely no sense to me, other than Acapulco, their starting center. All of their started lineup just needs the ball in their hands to be successful, and I don't see that as a winning recipe. But who knows? Could be wrong on that one. But yeah, I don't really totally see it. So I have Toronto as at like 10 range, but yeah, just a really weird team because the talent's definitely there. It's just like the fit. Like I especially throwing Ingram into the mix. Like it's a weird team.
Yeah, they definitely are very confusing. And I think when that Ingram trade kind of happened, a lot of people were kind of like, oh, well, this happens now. Like the rumors of RJ Barrett were kind of circling. Everyone's like, all right, this kind of makes sense. But now that nothing's happened, it's kind of just like, oh, okay. So they're just throwing anything at the wall just to make it stick and hoping that it just works. And I mean, for Toronto, a smaller market, it makes sense that that's what you're going to try to do. You don't want to lose value or just do anything like that. But I do think that if this like core doesn't really work, maybe we could see a little bit reset come out of Toronto in the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're just gonna wrap it up there before we head out. Just give you guys the chance to plug your work. Tell our listeners where they can find you at.
Yeah, so I'm the site expert for Fansided's Indiana Pacers site, 8points9seconds.com. And I also write for Athlon Sports. I mostly write about the NBA, but I've been sprinkling in a little bit of MLB content recently, so that's been pretty fun. I'm on social media. My name should be around here somewhere. You can follow me. I don't really go on it, but if you want to chat, I'll be there. So yeah, check it all out.
Awesome. Yeah, you can follow me over on Twitter at Bruce Veliz. I post about the Celtics and the Suns. I also am a staff writer at Brightside of the Sun, so if you want to check out some of my written work over there, you can definitely see that. And then hopefully some more stuff will be coming in the future that we can definitely get some more plugs in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for hopping on the pod again, boys. We'll have to do it again sometime. But yeah, fun episode. Take care, guys.
Too, man. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eamon.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Cassels Cast. Once again, thank you to my guests, Bruce and Elie. It's a great time. Catch you guys on the next episode.